So hello, my darling friend Shekinah. How lovely to have you here on this call. And what I wanted to do is just have chats about our work and what we do and your journey as an intimacy coach and working with Intimacy Coach International and what you've learned and all of those things. Don't answer them all at once because that will be very confusing. But just chatting, because a lot of the time people about this sort of work, they're always fascinated when they hear that you're an intimacy coach, but they want to ask you questions in private. And obviously it's very difficult to get clients onto a call like this to talk about the work because it feels quite personal. So even though we get good testimonials from time to time, a lot of people don't want to talk about this work unless they are actually doing it themselves. So this is to give people insight into the many aspects of how we do holistic intimacy coaching and what we do with the training course with Intimacy Coach International, etc. So that's all the official stuff out of the way. So the first official question I have for you is what's been your learning about your own personal journey so far? You know, because when we first had the chat about doing this course and becoming an intimacy coach and all of those things, I always tell you guys, I tell the people who join Intimacy Coach International that it's going to be a personal journey as well. And that I think is required for authentic teaching. It doesn't mean that you're all going to have exactly the same journey and experience all the same things that your clients are going to go through, obviously, but it really is about having the personal journey as well. So what's your takeaway from your personal journey, the biggest thing about your personal journey, or anything you'd like to share about you as Shekinah?
My biggest take on the intimacy coaching work and what I have experienced so far for myself is that there's always a level deeper that I can get to know myself. There's no end. There's no, oh, wow, okay, this is who I am and it's finished and it's now complete. Because things keep changing and there's different aspects and different ways of looking at things and many things that come up. So it's a never-ending journey, and it's not about looking for the end result, but it's about enjoying the journey as I go along and enjoying to get to explore who I am as an individual, who I am in my sexuality, my sensuality as a human being, and getting to discover that in my partner as well, having the opportunity to get to know him on a deeper level and learning how I would like to show up in a relationship, what changes, because I feel personally that we are made to expand and to grow and wanting to grow. So as much as I can say, yes, my lover or my partner should accept me for who I am, that, you know, is a key component, there are parts of myself that I want to expand and better and show up differently in a relationship from how I did maybe a few years ago. So, and I have learned a lot of knowing myself and how I want to express myself in a relationship and how I want to honor my partner through the intimacy coaching work.
Well, it's so wonderful to hear that, because that's exactly what I wanted. You know, all those years ago when I started, I'm going to do it my way, which was to create individual coaches instead of like a franchise where everybody learns exactly the same thing and there's a right way to do it and a wrong way to do it. And when I hear you talking about your own life and how you're integrating that work into your relationship, it makes me very happy, because as I was discussing this with Susie on another call. And we were talking about how often people come to see an intimacy coach or a counselor or a therapist only when they're in crisis, not because they want to expand or evolve themselves or experience something deeper, more connected. Often because I think sexuality and sensuality, firstly, they're lumped together in the same box a lot of the time, and they're not the same thing. Does sensuality exist in sexuality? Absolutely. But sensuality can be separate. But also, I think it's quite difficult to encourage women to step into the fullness of their sensuality and their sexuality and finding different places to fall within that, and especially within like a new relationship when you're just setting the relationship up. So there seems to be these two areas in relationship that are very difficult to integrate into change. That's the very beginning of a new relationship. We tend to do what we've always done, and then we get what we've always gotten, instead of introducing new ways and evolutions into those relationships. And when a relationship flatlines, So after a certain amount of years, it's like, well, this is just what it is. And everybody's comfortable and nobody's growing or exploring or thinking about ways that they can still connect. Why intimacy coaching? Why did you start looking? Why did you end up here training with me?
So my journey with intimacy coaching is quite interesting. It's actually, evolved into pretty interesting ways. So I can remember at the end of my marriage, just before the end of my marriage, my ex-husband suggested that we go and see an intimacy coach. I was very set in my sexuality and my views around sexuality, and anything beyond that for me was an excuse to have an orgy or to invite other people into our relationship. It was elements that threatened me. I didn't feel comfortable with even talking about sex. So I was very conservative in my views, very set in my ways. And we started looking into finding an intimacy coach, and I couldn't wrap my head around it. And eventually that marriage ended, and just simply because we were not on the same wavelength. That was just as simple as it was. And in this process, while I was working through my divorce and finding my feet in my own life and my own individuality and who I am, I started thinking about the ways that I view sex and sensuality and what limited views I had. And I started realizing and seeing the damage it did, the fact that I didn't even know myself. I didn't even know who I was. I didn't even know what I liked. So it is, for me, then understandable that a relationship will deteriorate. And I started exploring in different spiritual movements. I started exploring different, reading materials and seeing different people and speaking to people and all these kinds of things. And one thing led to another, and I just started realizing, but I want more for myself. I want to know who I am, and I want to be able to be in a relationship with someone and share with them who I am and express what it is that I like. Even with sex, because if I don't know what I like, how am I going to tell my partner? There's no way. And feeling unfulfilled and not knowing, and also knowing that my partner might feel unfulfilled and that they might be too scared to share with me who they are and what they like because of my limited views. So I started exploring, and yes, I've burnt my fingers along the way, as it goes with learning these kinds of things. And I just got to this point where I was tired of leaning strictly to medical and strictly to spiritual. And I just wanted to find that happy medium. And it was freaking amazing. I Googled and I came across your site. And when I saw that site, I just felt, this is mine. This is for me. And this is where I want to be. And this is where I felt a huge shift for me, where my defenses could be let down, where I felt like, okay, I wasn't being taken advantage of, and I could really start dipping into myself, and I could make it my own. That my views of who I am as a person and what I want in a relationship is not wrong, or that there's no judgment on who I am, and I don't have to judge other people for who they are and how they express themselves in relationships. And since then, I am so grateful that I am on this journey. I'm so grateful that I get to learn, and every time something new comes up, and that I get to express that to a partner, and that I can actually hold space for that partner and ask them, what do you like? What do you want? And seeing that person blossom when they can start telling me, hey, this is what I like. Can we try this? And bringing fun back into sexuality and sensuality and intimacy, and not just like be dead serious and
Yeah.
I
Play
love
space.
that. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I heard that once. Somebody said that the way adults play is through sexuality. And I thought that's actually a lovely way to look at it, because we are so serious about sex, and we only go and see someone for coaching or for help when we're in crisis. Whereas with other things, like we'll go on a cooking course and we'll learn how to cook different meals, and we'll go and learn how to ballroom dance, or we'll go and start jogging. Well, some people will, and good for them. We'll do yoga when perhaps we've never done yoga before. I mean, the first yoga class I dragged my poor husband to, he walked away and said, never again. And now we do it every morning, but we do an adjusted form that works for both of us, that we can do in our PJs, because that works for us. Often when we go to a structured yoga class, which we do go to as well once a week, but everyday yoga has to be in our pajamas. We haven't cleaned our teeth yet. We've just had a cup of coffee, because otherwise it doesn't get done. Because we're also normal people. I'd love to say to you that we're hyper disciplined and we do this regimented and that. We don't, I mean, we have to schedule things just like everybody else does. It's fascinating to me, though, that you've sort of come full circle, and that you have now become the person that you needed. And that's why I started this company. I wanted specific help with learning these things in a safe way, in a way that no one was going to get involved in my relationship. It wasn't going to turn into something that felt out of my comfort zone, or it was too sexual, or, when I was looking and I was Googling sexual spirituality, no one was coming up. I actually went to go and see a psychologist, and I explained to him what had happened, because I'd had this sexual awakening, and I was quite open about it, in the sense that I was saying, I just, this different energy in my body, and I had this experience, and my hands felt funny, and he just looked at me very, very strangely. And I think he just, from what I remember, he asked me a lot of questions and just sort of said, well, it's sort of a midlife crisis, or something to that effect. And if you want to work with me, it's once a week for this amount of months before you'll see any difference. And I just didn't feel heard, and I didn't feel seen. And, when I talk to the people that I'm coaching or work with clients or whatever, I find that when I share my story, so many of them, people go, oh, me too. They have that moment of going, I'm not the only one. I thought I was the only person that felt like this. And there are definitely areas of our lives that we need our community. We need our tribe of people that we can talk to. And often that's not family and friends, because, when I first started talking about this work, people thought I'd lost the plot, because I had a very successful career as a singer and performer, and so people were like, what? You're going into this, what? This spiritual sexuality, conscious sexual, what the heck? Are you a sexual surrogate? Are you a prostitute? Are you a masseuse? What are you? And it was very difficult to explain at that time, because I didn't even know. I was just going and working with various people and learning various things. And oftentimes walking into spaces where I walked away and thought, well, that's not the way I want to do it. That was uncomfortable and unpleasant, and it wasn't respectful, and it wasn't honoring, so I really wanted to create, I want to say safer ways, but nothing in life is truly safe. It is a bit of an illusion, but at least a space where imposed boundaries and codes of conduct, etc., would be respected to a much, much larger extent. You can't ever truly have safety until you have safety in yourself, and even then you've got to trust someone. So I do believe you've got to take what resonates and discard the rest. And you can go on the magic carpet ride of this journey, and that can also be great fun. I just wouldn't advise it for anyone who's been sort of sexually traumatized, because it can be incredibly retriggering. What was the thing then that changed? Did you go and see an intimacy coach, or was it just talking about seeing one?
It was talking about seeing one, but in the midst of it all, it was, we spoke to like sexual experts and people that were trying to advise us. The problem with that was I wasn't ready. And we were moving at my ex-husband's pace at that time. So we were moving.
Yeah.
So it felt like my boundaries were being crossed over and over again, which made me more fearful and more fearful and more clingy and more needy, because I felt like my safety was being taken away. So that brought a lot of fear for me. And that's why when we got divorced and I was on my own, and the threat of, okay, I'm about to lose my partner was removed, I could move into that space for myself.
But for yourself, not for your partner. So did it feel like something you were going to do for him as opposed to for yourself?
When we started that whole thing just before our marriage ended, yes, I did it for him.
And that it doesn't work. Well, I mean, maybe it can, but I've not heard many stories where people were, felt like coerced, like they'd lose the relationship. You often hear this also when people want to open their relationships. And I've discovered in my own experience, and again, I'm just speaking anecdotally from my own experience and experience of clients, is often when people are talking about opening a relationship, it means it's already been done.
Yeah. That's from my experience.
Yeah. And I think that energetically your partner knows that there's a longing for exploration that might not necessarily take us on the ride too. If you know what I mean, take us on the ride. That sounds interesting. You've always got to look at the languaging around everything you say when you're talking about sexuality and intimacy, but you understand what I'm saying about that. If you'd walked into a space where somebody had said to you, we're absolutely not going to do anything until you set the pace because you're the most fearful here. And, do you think there was anything that could have been done at that point to help you go on your own journey? Because when you see clients as couples, like together, we really focus on the individual journeys within that relationship. And often they're at different speeds. I found that years and years ago, and when Tim and I were first married, he was the one who was looking for bigger sexual experiences or looking to outside experts or whatever. And I was just rolling my eyes and just thinking, oh, Lord, more sex. And I saw it as being a chore because there wasn't a lot of pleasure in it. It was something I was doing mainly to keep him happy. And it was pleasurable being with him, but it wasn't the heights and the experiences that we have now, and I didn't know about what was possible in the human body at that point. So I wasn't willing to go down any of those paths of exploration because I just thought, well, I know what there is to know. I thought we've been doing it this way for 16 years. This is the way it is, isn't it? So, when things started to change in my body and we started learning these techniques, etc., there was a lot of difficulty incorporating that, and there was a lot of resentment as well, because it was like when I wanted to explore, and I don't mean opening up our relationship, I mean just learning about different pleasure techniques and how the body actually works, because you can't really learn that from porn, because porn isn't really about pleasure. There is an element of pleasure to it, but a lot of it is contractive in nature and very visual. It's not necessarily deep pleasure states, and the other side of that polarity. Like it wasn't an expanded orgasmic space, because as I said earlier too, when I was talking to Susie, expanded pleasure looks pretty boring looking on, because nobody's doing anything. You're in your own pleasure space and you can be having this massive orgasm and you're in this massive flow state, but it's not necessarily something that's going to sell well or be marketable on porn, with pornography. Energetically though, it's because it's not very visual, and we do tend to be visual when it's video things, when we're looking for something to I don't know, take us to another level and turn us on and all those sorts of things. I mean, I don't have an issue with porn. I just think that it's limited, so when he was feeling resentful because when he was interested, I was like going, no, we know what we need to know. It is what it is. There's no further to go. And then suddenly when I went to learn all this stuff and I feel scared and afraid and like, how am I going to journey with this? So it's just interesting how that balance in a relationship, it's not like we think it's going to be that we go to counseling, we go and see a coach or whatever, and it's just going to be magically fixed. It's not, because the way you are sexually is patterned and it's deep, and it comes from, you know, your puberty and all of these years of conditioning and patterning. That doesn't change overnight. And if you're fearful of losing your partner, that fear sort of overrides everything else.
Definitely. And also the fact that working at the pace of the person that's more willing makes me, in my experience, made me feel more threatened and made me feel more scared and closed off even more. So to answer your question about a little bit earlier, I'm sure if I had a coach at the time that maybe said, okay, cool, we're going to work at your pace because you are the more fearful, and set out the program saying, okay, cool, I'm not going to work on your partner as a coach. You and your partner work together, and I'll have a model, or, you know, put the whole program out for me. That might have make me feel more secure, so that I could maybe open to the suggestion. But
because there's so many different ways of working with people. I mean, I can work with somebody, and normally when I work with couples, I don't put my hands on them. You know, it's as a useful generalization. I often don't put my hands on couples. You know, when we're teaching whatever, we'll use latex models, we'll use diagrams, we'll use a lot of homework and feedback on the homework, and there'll be a lot of looking at the feet and perhaps blushing, and sometimes beautiful experiences that happen spontaneously within the relationship. Because I also feel that sometimes there's a level of showing off with people who know a lot about the body and about pleasure, etc., where it's like a sign of showing off that you can elicit a response from someone because you know the work. Whereas the harder way, but the more empowering way, is to teach someone else what you know, so that they can incorporate that into the relationship, because they've already got the love connection and the sensual connection and the sexual connection. All of that's already there. You don't have to build it. So it's actually sometimes easier for them to learn it as homework. And there are people in the fields of conscious sexuality, etc., that I feel sometimes show off, like how good they are, as opposed to how they're empowering someone else to move into their own sensuality and sexuality and conscious sexual energy and life force energy. And how much of this work is about energy and relaxing and being playful and curious, and it's not all serious. We're doing sexuality now, you know. It's fascinating to me how letting go of those boundaries. I mean, like, sex, I find sex funny. A lot of the time there's tummy gurgles, and there's going to be a little bit of gas, or, you know, it's because we're human beings. And in the morning there's morning breath, and, you know, it's there's all these sorts of things. So it's just interesting. And what do you feel is your biggest way that you can help people who come and see you? What is your the biggest? I'm not asking this question very well. My head's gone too hot. I did a yoga class before we did this course. I think I'm still in Shavasana. Hang on, let me look at my notes.
It's so good.
Okay, so if we do this like officially, who is your ideal client? Who do you love working with, and what are their coaching issues or learnings?
So my ideal client will vary between women that have experienced some form of trauma in their life, most likely divorce or sexual disconnect, or, you know, whatever the case might be, and wanting to move back into a space of exploring that for themselves. But also my ideal person to work with would be couples that are where both partners are open to wanting to learn and explore together as a unit, and how to express themselves towards each other. So even though the one might be more willing than the other one, but both of them are at least open to try. And
yeah, they're at that point where they want to learn something. It's not just, this is broken, fix it.
Yeah. So
often it's
that
too
is
late.
definitely-
If it's too late for us, because actually what we teach and what we do is about evolution and growth and evolving something and healing things, but healing them incredibly gently by not actually necessarily focusing on the issues, but creating techniques around them that teach with pleasure and relaxation, connection and love. And that it sometimes just gets rid of the issue, because you're not focusing on the issue. Because you know, when they come and see you, they're so worried about the issue, whatever that is. You know, let's say there's a problem with erection because something's happened, or we're growing older, or there's a problem with libido, and you know, and there's a problem with pleasuring, and they can't find the G spot, and they can't, you know, whatever the thing is. There's a million and one things that are quite common for everybody. And then, you know, working with people who are not coming in going, this is wrong and that is wrong and this is wrong. People who are coming in and they're excited and nervous about learning, and then teaching them, and they realize, oh, it's okay. We're going to do this. It's like Love University, or, you know, it's a pity that we don't all learn this stuff when we're growing up. I think maybe there was a time in humanity where in community, people would be taught from people who'd been through it, and there would be this learning and this wisdom would be passed down. And because sexuality perhaps wasn't as shamed, it was just taught, and it was just part of the sort of communal wisdom of people. And I guess we get to be the people who pass it down to an extent, because people find their own ways forward. That's what's interesting as well, because with a lot of sort of sexual counseling and stuff and things you see online, there'll be like intimacy tips, and it'll be like, or you'll read in a magazine or something, it'll say 10 tips for better sex, and it'll say things like, show your partner how you masturbate, for example. And I'm just thinking to myself, that would be far too terrifying for me. Before I started learning this work and being comfortable in pleasure scenarios, real pleasure scenarios, that would have been impossible for me to do. And if somebody's grown up with a very conservative background, you know, they're probably not even doing any sort of self-pleasure work. So how do you start with being so sexual? You can't. It's too hard for people. And so for me especially, I would just think, maybe I'm a prude, or maybe I, you know, because I don't really want to share that with my partner, you know, at this point, because I feel that if I share that, that's something that's very personal to me. And then that's just going to be used as an excuse to have more sex instead of creating more pleasure. So there's ways to undo those dynamics, but they take a little bit of learning and a little bit of work. But, you know, I get so excited about this stuff. Of so many things are in my head, I don't even know where to go with the work. But it's like, I've heard your story before from people, and I've seen your story in some of my clients' eyes when they've come to see me. Because sometimes there have been couples that have come to see me when I was still working with clients and not just training coaches, but there'd be couples who come to see me, and I could see the fear, the absolute fear in one of the partner's eyes, and the other one was, I want to learn this and I want to do that, and this is how I want to. And they were excited and turned on by all the thoughts of all the pleasure and the sexuality and the, you know, nakedness, hopefully, or so, you know, all these things that people get excited about. And then the other partner was sitting there white knuckling, basically thinking, you know, how am I going to get through this? Am I going to lose my partner? You know, how is it possible for this to be safe, you know, in a way that's going to work for both of us? And just terrified. And I've been in those positions myself as well, where I've been white knuckling my way through an experience because I was doing it to keep someone else happy instead of actually doing it because it was something that felt right for me. And I don't really know the way around that. You know, I have to say that normally if somebody comes to see me and I can see someone is very, very reluctant, normally I'll just leave it alone and say, you know, I like to work with people when they're both in the space to move into learning, etc. And we can start incredibly gently. And, you know, we can start with breath work. We can start with working in the right nervous system, creating trust so that you guys can do the homework. You know, and I'm not going to touch you, and I'm going to talk things very gently. And what sort of languaging would you prefer, and what makes you feel comfortable, what makes you feel uncomfortable, so that we can really find a way forward where I'm conduiting and coaching you, but it's almost like I'm not there. Although I always get so excited when people have good experiences, you know, it's I used to give gold stars. Really did at one point. You know, I'd give them gold stars, and eventually it would become comfortable to have more pleasure or have a crygasm, you know. Because like sometimes when things start opening up, the tears come, the happiness come. It's like you don't know if you're laughing or crying or having an orgasm. You don't know. It's just very confusing.
A mix of everything.
In session, they don't tend to be having the orgasm as well, but you know, when they're at home, they're crying and laughing and with their partner, and you know, and especially when you're doing some of the healing work, because sometimes when you're doing some of the gentle healing work, you send people home with homework, and it's simple stuff. It's not even necessarily very sexual, and suddenly people go into releasing so much pain and so much trauma, and the other person thinks, oh, I've done it wrong, I've broken them, you know. And so people don't know that sexuality can often bring up huge emotions and huge, you know, they don't know where to put that. It's like, I know where to put moaning and performing and enjoying myself, you know, well, perhaps I do, but I don't know where to put, you know, I don't know where to put that. You know, especially when your husband stands back and goes, what's wrong? And it's like, I don't know, I just, I'm feeling things. I mean, I've had that experience in a yoga class, so, you know, it can happen during sex as well, you know, and the person on the other end of it is sort of going, what do I do now? It's like, phone your intimacy coach.
Here's the phone.
Yes. I'll guide you through it. But what's been your experience about sort of extremes of emotion and that as well, you know, with your own journey and with the journey of clients?
Yeah, so that's definitely, I mean, with me, I also had like a sexual experience with my partner where it was like, started crying. It's like, I don't know what to do. And he was like handling the situation very well. He just held space for me and like honored me in that. But for me, because obviously the first thing that came to mind is shame. It's like, shit, how can I cry while I'm having an orgasm? How does this work? You know, and
how does this work?
I don't understand what the hell's happening here. And that also helped with the intimacy, because now realizing that my partner can hold me in that space and allow me to bring those emotions to the forefront makes me feel more secure and safe. And I think that's what we learn with the intimacy coaching as well, is should something like that happen for my partner, I understand how to hold that space for him too. So that's why this work is so important, I feel, is because we are humans and we go very deep. And being able to hold space for each other with whatever is going on and making the relationship that sacred safety zone is important. It's important to know how to hold each other. And if we can't, that's fine. I mean, it's not always going to happen 100%, but then being open and honest and saying, you know what, I'm not capable of holding the space for you. Do you want to talk to someone rather? Or but learning all of that. Sorry, I've gone off on a tangent. Can you just repeat your question again?
Yes. No, I think we're tangenting, but that's okay. There's like a natural flow that's happening in the conversation that I think, and that's what I wanted. I didn't want it to be too much. I ask a question, you answer it. It's like, you know, I wanted it to just be a conversation between peers, and I think that's perhaps going to be interesting for people who aren't intimacy coaches or who are maybe interested in exploring it. What would you say then creates safety for people? You know, what are specific things that you do in your practice to create safety for people? Like
So,
in their nervous systems and in the way they looking at the process or working with a course, all those sorts of things.
so how we work, or how I work with safety when it comes to my clients, I'll ask them, okay, so make the environment nice for yourself, especially, say, for example, if it's an online session that we have, but an in-person session is making the environment nice for oneself, having the temperature in a way that you don't feel too cold or too warm or uncomfortable in any shape, form, or way. Get yourself dressed up in something comfy. Maybe bring a blanket for if you process information, or if something happens and you feel a little bit triggered, so that you can wrap a blanket around yourself and kind of cuddle or cocoon yourself. This is good for relationship space as well. So I would suggest to my clients, if you are about to have a courageous conversation that you scheduled for a specific time, that's not in front of the TV or while the kids are running around screaming in the background, set a time, set a place, and set the place up for safety. So maybe light a candle, maybe light some incense, or spray the room with a scent that feels comfortable and smells good to both you and your partner. Because it doesn't help that it's a smell that upsets one person, or maybe
setting up
so setting up a place that feels safe to both people involved, not just to one person. Maybe have a sweet, like a block of chocolate at hand, have some water, so if your throat feels scratchy, that you have that. Maybe have a pillow, so that if you need to scream, you can scream into the pillow. So those are the external things. But then also, like I said, is the putting time aside, scheduling. Okay, we need to have an important conversation Wednesday night, 7:00, when the kids are with grandma or they're asleep. The TV is off, and setting up the space. And then when it comes to the physical body, to the self, especially I think with having courageous conversations with your partner as well, taking a few minutes, at least 3 minutes, to drop into your parasympathetic nervous system with breathing techniques, taking that time so that you can move from the chaoticness of the day and what happened and, things that you are thinking about, and just dropping into a space where you feel a little bit more calm. Obviously, when you have a courageous conversation, there's a lot of nerves, and you might not completely be all zened out when you move into that space, but just to at least prepare yourself so that conversation doesn't have to spiral into fighting and screaming and throwing plates at each other, or whatever the case might be. But having maybe more a constructive kind of conversation, or even a session for that matter. So activating the PNS with the breathing techniques. And then also afterwards, after a session, for example, I would take time to check in with a client and say, listen, are you okay? I'll phone them a day later, or send a message, ask them, are you okay? And also tell them there's certain times that they can call me, anything that comes up that they need to share. So, and then also on another part for partners is, if a suggestion that I would give, and what I am being taught, is when someone comes with emotions or they are feeling triggered, for me, it's not necessary to change them or change the situation or give input, but just to be there and be still and listen to what they have to say, so that they can feel heard in that space, so that they know that the person is not going to run away after they express themselves. So, and that there's no need to change them. I'm feeling sad at the moment, just let me feel sad. I don't need a hug. I don't need a tissue. Just let me be.
Just need to feel it. Yeah.
Yeah.
As you're talking there, I'm just thinking to myself, what a hypocrite I have been for such a long time, because it took me so long in my own relationship to learn to fight consciously, in the sense that if there was a, as you call, courageous conversation. I love that terminology. I've never thought about it that way before, but that's a lot of conversations about things that need to be discussed are had on the back of something else, and then the fight is supposedly about something else, but it's not really about that. It's about this other thing that you haven't had the courageous conversation about. Love the terminology. But I realized that a long time ago, even though I was teaching it, a lot of the time I was getting frustrated and not having some of the difficult conversations with my husband in the correct space, in a space where there was a calming of the nervous system, there was a regulation of the nervous system, there was a mutual respect, and then a practicing of the active listening. It tended to be, we were cross-talking, we were talking at opposite purposes, and it would just spiral each time. And he said to me, I don't know why you get so upset about us fighting, because we normally find some sort of solution. There's one or two fights we've had for 28 years, because we've been together for 28 years, that I don't know if they're ever going to shift or go away, because they're parts of our personalities that are at odds with one another. So I don't know if those fights will ever stop happening. But the arguments have changed now. Even though sometimes I don't get it completely right, I don't sit there and actively listen and reflect back and do all of the things that I teach other people to do. And when I'm teaching them, I also say to them, you won't get this right all the time. It's just learning how to communicate differently and actually hear the person and then reflect back. But I realized I wasn't doing that. And so I had to start instituting that back in. And so instead of going into the fight, you can feel when it's starting to build, and then I'm starting to get snippy, and then he's starting to get snippy, and I know it's going to move into, I know the pattern. It's been 28 years. It's been a lifetime. You know? And then actually breaking that pattern, and then also sometimes dealing with a bit of sarcasm, because, you know, now it's like, oh, you're in intimacy coach mode, are you? You know, and so not always, but sometimes there's a bit of resistance and a bit of, you know, like sarcasm, because it's one of my husband's amazing qualities, and he has many. That's a karmic circle, me being sarcastic right back. But we actually started having most fights, like 70 to 80% of them, that would actually resolve, because we would eventually move away, do some breathing, come back together. When it started getting heated again, move away, do some breathing, come back together, start reflecting and really hearing the other person instead of just trying to explain ourselves. Because I'm a big explainer and a big talker. And often I think Tim just gets irritated. It's like, you don't have to explain it if the answer is no. And I'm like, no, but I want to explain it. And he's like, but you don't have to. And I'm like, but I want to. And, you know, and then we're going off onto this place where he's like, well, you've just said no. So, you know, or whatever patterning it brings up. And he helped me get over this fear of fighting, because in my makeup, there's still this fear that comes up every time we fight, that, oh, this could be it. You know, and it's 28 years and we've been through heaven and hell together. You wouldn't think that I would still have that reaction to, you know, an argument or whatever, where I'm going to think, oh, I'm going to lose him. Or, you know, you wouldn't think that that would still happen. But it does, because we're human.
Yeah.
And just because we're intimacy coaches and we teach this stuff doesn't mean we always get it perfect in our own lives. But I think that's important to recognize that it's all a work in progress. And some people know a little bit more about certain things and they can help you, or they can give you options that you've perhaps not considered and ways forward. Because not everyone can do active listening or do those exercises the way that, you know, I do them. I sometimes like to take notes when Tim's talking to me, because otherwise my mind scatters off. So I actually almost treat him like a client. And the first couple of times I did that, he was like, are you getting proof that I've said something? So later on you can throw it back at me. And I thought, gee, that's a very good idea. You know, it's like recording your argument to see, do you interrupt the person? Or I wouldn't actually advise that. I think that's like turning into lawyers, you know, in your argument. Yeah. But it's because I wanted to really listen to what he was saying to me and try and find the roots around what was irritating us, instead of fighting about the thing we think we're fighting about, because often it isn't the slice of cheese or the in-laws or the kids, or it's about something that's underneath that thing.
Exactly. And I love what you said about not always getting it right. Because the way I explain it now, it sounds freakishly easy, and it sounds like, okay, cool, that's what happens all the time. And I mean, this is something that I'm only learning now as well. So like a lot of times it's still, you know, like on the spur of the moment, but I love when I get to go into a space of that, you know, more focused, more, okay, what is actually bothering you, so that I can listen and maybe see what it is that I can change, or vice versa.
Things can be ideal without being perfect, because it's ideal for me to go through the experiences I still have with my husband, because then I don't think I know it all. Well, I mean, I do sometimes think I know it all, but that's just my ego. No, I don't know it all, obviously. But, you know, it's like when we have a fight, instead of feeling the fear of, oh, we're fighting, and oh, I'm not doing my techniques, and oh, does that make me a bad intimacy coach? Instead of thinking all of those things, and thinking more of what he said to me, which is about, we're having a fight, but it's a conscious fight. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to move that energy into a space where it can actually change something, as long as that energy is being channeled in a way that's leading to conscious change or awareness of the other person's viewpoint or expression of what you're going through. And one of the things that did change forever in our communication was when we decided, what are we trying to achieve here? Am I venting? Am I looking for advice, or am I looking for resonance? You know, so if I'm looking for resonance, I'm waiting to hear from him. Oh, I understand. I felt that way last Tuesday. I can relate. I resonate with that. And if I'm venting, I don't want him to fix me. I don't want to vent and say, I can't use this program and the software is driving me nuts. And because he's technically minded and I'm not. Well, I am, but not to the level that he is. And so then he wants to fix it. And he wants to get on the computer and show me what to do. And then I'm like, no, bugger off, because I'm busy trying to learn this. I just want to tell you how frustrated I am right now. So the moment we got the thing of saying, no, I'm just venting, then he knew, oh, okay, wait, take advice back, take help back, don't need to fix. She just wants to talk. And I think in the beginning that was very difficult for him, because he loves me. So he wants to fix it and make it better. And often I also want to give advice because, hey, gee, I know so much. I know so many techniques and tricks, and, you know, I'm going into coaching mode, and he just wants to tell me about he's in a shit mood, or, you know, or something happened today that made him feel whichever way. So once we learn to, and we still catch ourselves. Sometimes he'll start and I'll say, I'm venting. And he goes, sorry, you know, and so then he knows, back off, don't try and fix. I just want to moan. I just want to tell you about something, you know, and I'm not always positive and vibey and unicorn farts and rainbows, you know. It's just not possible to be that way all the time, because it would be very boring. There has to be light and shade and ups and downs for you to appreciate stuff. But that is what changed our communication. And I'm just thinking how much he's also taught me, which sometimes I get very irritated with, because I want to be the one that's the intimacy coach and developed all this work. And then sometimes he comes up with something and I'm like, damn it, why didn't I see that? That is so clever. That's so insightful. And I'm a bit annoyed that I didn't think about it.
That is so cool.
So I definitely can't be any sort of guru, because, you know, my ego is definitely too much in the way. But it's, you know, and being together for 28 years, sometimes we go through the same stuff that somebody in a brand new relationship goes through.
Sure.
You know, it doesn't matter how long you've been together, or some things can still be terrifying. I mean, you know, they can sometimes people can be together for 50 years and not know how to look into each other's eyes or make a connection past family plans, or, you know, going to work and seeing people for supper and sort of watching TV in the evenings. You know, they're sort of living life past each other instead of connecting. And it's just lovely to be part of people's connecting as well. You know, that's a gorgeous thing. Oh, my Lord, have we run over time? We actually have. Look at that. We've run over time. So let's tie up. I can't believe we ran over time, but we did. If there was one thing you wanted to say to people who are thinking about doing some intimacy coaching work or going into any of the neo-tantra space or the conscious sexuality space, if you had a piece of advice for them, what would that be?
My advice would be for open-mindedness. Like, I know people move into the space and think, yeah, we're going to learn this new sexual technique, or, you know, whatever the case, and that's all fun and good. But even the most subtle exercises can surprise a person when it comes to intimacy and connection. So it's about, I did a breathing exercise with my partner a while ago, and just seeing how he handled himself in that space and how he took control of the situation was a huge turn on for me. So just with a breathing exercise, but getting to see a different side of a person in a very subtle way. And it completely blew my mind. Instead of just thinking sex or this and placing things in a box, just being open and seeing what happens with the exercises and allowing and practicing and applying. That's the advice I would give. And have fun with it.
And have fun. Yeah. I think the element of laughter and fun and joy and curiosity, reintroducing that back into your sex life is for me absolutely wonderful. I know there will be people who would never feel comfortable with laughter or play in a sort of sexual space, and that's absolutely okay. Everyone's got their own approach, but for me that brings up such joy and such connection when you realize how sacred it is and also how playful it can be, you know. So you know, that's if I could have seen a way forward all those years ago, I'm the me hopefully now that I needed all those years ago. If I'd heard somebody talking about this stuff, I think I would have been curious. I would have gone, that sounds interesting. I don't know if I'm ready for it yet, but it sounds interesting. It's something I'm going to, hopefully people will listen to this and go, it's something I might be willing to look at. It's not something I'm willing to do right now, but I'm just going to have a look. It's going to have a little peek. Just a little peek. Shekinah, thank you so much for joining me tonight and for chatting to me. And I'm sure we're going to do this again. And eventually we might even do something live. But at the moment, it's just going to be recorded and available for people to watch and have a look at. So thanks very much for doing this today.